If you're facing an identity theft charge in Arizona, you know it's a really serious situation. The laws are complicated, the penalties are harsh, and it's easy to feel completely overwhelmed. So in this explainer, we're going to break it all down. We'll look at exactly what Arizona's identity theft laws mean, from the most basic offense all the way up to the most serious charges. Let's jump right in.
Okay, first things first, we have to get this out of the way. This is for educational purposes only. It is absolutely not legal advice. If you're facing criminal charges, you need to talk to an experienced Arizona criminal defense lawyer immediately.
So let's start with a question that gets right to the heart of the matter. What's the actual difference between, say, using a fake ID to get into a club, which is a misdemeanor, and getting hit with a felony identity theft charge? That line is a lot thinner than most people think. And knowing where it is, well, that's crucial. To really answer that question, we've got to start with the fundamentals. So let's define our terms. According to Arizona law, what is identity theft?
The whole thing starts with this statute, ARS 13-2008, taking the identity of another. The two big takeaways here are the words knowingly and unlawful purpose. It's not about accidentally grabbing the wrong wallet, it's about intentionally taking someone's information without their permission because you're planning to do something illegal with it.
And when the law says personal identifying information, what does that actually cover? Well, it's way more than you might guess. Of course, you've got the obvious stuff: name, social security number, driver's license, but it also includes things like your bank account numbers and PINs, details about your employer, and even your biometric data, like fingerprints or DNA. It's a really broad category.
Okay, so that's the basic definition. But for the state to actually convict someone, they have to prove a few very specific things happened. Let's walk through exactly what's on their checklist.
Think of it like this. A prosecutor has 5 boxes they absolutely have to tick, and they have to prove each one beyond a reasonable doubt. First, they have to show you acted knowingly. Second, that you actually took, had, or used the information. Third, that it belonged to somebody else. Fourth, that you didn't have permission. And fifth, this is a huge one, that you intended to use it for an illegal reason.
And here's something that catches a lot of people by surprise. The state doesn't have to prove that the victim lost a single dime. The crime isn't about the final result. It's all about your intent. The second you take that information with an unlawful plan in mind, in the eyes of the law, the crime is already complete.
So that's the basic offense, a Class 4 felony. But from there, things can get a lot more serious really fast. And that's when we get into something called aggravated identity theft.
So what turns a regular identity theft charge into an aggravated one? Well, there are 3 main triggers. 1. If the crime involves 3 or more victims. 2. If it causes a financial loss of $3,000 or more. Or 3. If it has anything to do with employment fraud.
And that last one, the employment fraud piece, is a really big deal. The law is super specific here. If you use someone else's identity to get through a system like E-Verify or any other kind of employment eligibility check, that automatically bumps the charge up to aggravated identity theft. No gray area. And believe it or not, it gets even more serious. From aggravated, we go to the highest level, the most serious charge on the books for this crime: trafficking in the identity of another. This is where the focus shifts from just using stolen data to actually spreading it around. The difference between these two is so important to understand. Aggravated theft is all about the impact of the crime, how many people were hurt, or how much money was lost. Trafficking, on the other hand, is about the action itself. It's about knowingly selling, transferring, or transmitting that stolen information, which suggests a much bigger, more organized crime. And if you look at the prosecutor's checklist for trafficking, it looks pretty familiar, right? But there's one critical change. Look at number 2, conduct. Here, the state has to prove you didn't just use the information. You actively sold it, you transferred it, you transmitted it. That's the whole ballgame.
So, we've talked about what these crimes are. Now let's get down to the real-world consequences. What does this all actually mean when it comes to sentencing, probation, and the clock that prosecutors are racing against?
First up, the statute of limitations. In Arizona, prosecutors have 7 years. 7 years from when the offense allegedly happened to file these felony charges. That is a very, very long time for someone to have to look over their shoulder.
And the potential penalties? They jump up fast. The basic taking identity offense is a Class 4 felony, which can mean up to 3.75 years in prison. But look at the jump to aggravated. That's a Class 3 felony with a sentence that can go all the way up to 8.75 years. And for trafficking, that's a Class 2 felony. We're talking a potential prison sentence of up to 12.5 years.
The consequences are incredibly severe.
All right, I know that was a ton of information, so let's just boil it all down and quickly go over the most important things you need to remember from all this.
First, remember that Arizona has 3 distinct levels of this crime: taking, aggravated, and trafficking. The seriousness goes up based on specific things, like how many victims there are, or if you're caught selling the data. A huge point: just having the intent to do something illegal is enough to get charged, even if nobody ever lost any money. And finally, the penalties are no joke, with the potential for some very serious prison time.
At the end of the day, Arizona's identity theft laws are complex, with a lot of different layers, and the stakes are just about as high as they get. A felony conviction can change your entire life, and that's why trying to face this kind of charge alone is a massive risk. It really leaves you with one last question to think about. When the consequences are this severe, is the risk ever worth it?